Hey everybody, it's Tommy with a Better Time. Got another Seiko for you. This is a Seiko automatic date. Not a day date, but another automatic date. If you saw the green one that I did with the crosshair dial, then this one looks remarkably like that, but it's not. It's a little bit different. It is gorgeous. If you look at that blue dial, this was a dial that Seiko used fairly often. They went back to it on some of the dive watches. It's just gorgeous with that blue. You can see that thing, it kind of changes color. You know, there's a bunch of different kinds of blue in there because it's very shiny in the inside. And then you've got that light blue chapter ring that goes around the outside, right, as it sort of cuts through the date window at 3 o'clock. And it is an automatic movement. It's running like a Swiss watch, even though it's a Japanese watch. This baby is just gorgeous. It has a really unique cushion case, especially for Seiko. If you look at that carefully, you see how that stepped case sort of goes around the outside and then it drops straight down on the lugs, which gives it a very, very unique profile from the side. Now, I said this looks a lot like the green one that I showed you. The difference in these two watches, the big one for me, is that you're not going to enter this watch from the front. As you can see, the marks for the tool to remove the back off. This is very traditional for Seiko, where you have a screw-down stainless steel back, threaded. This comes on a stainless steel strap that opens, right? So it's one of those slide into itself kind of a arrangement, and then you just clamp that down, and the way it fits to any wrist. I can actually wear this watch, which is really, really rare for most watches because I have a very, very, very large wrist. Unfortunately, most watches were not made for my size wrist, but that blue dial is just gorgeous. This case has never been polished, which is lovely. So it retains all of its original lines. Believe it or not, even after, better than 4 decades and some change, this thing still lights up a little with the lume. It doesn't hold it for long, but it does still light up on the lume. And fortunately, this was a model where lume was no longer, radioactive, so this didn't do any damage to the dial. And this is just an absolutely gorgeous automatic wristwatch, and it's tank. If you know anything about Seiko automatics, they run like nothing for a very, very long time. There's just no issues with them. They're very, very easy to work on. One of the things about Seiko that is great is you can take any Seiko watch, basically, any of the automatics, and swap movements out from one to the next. So parts for Seiko automatics are very, very easy to come by, and usually quite inexpensively. So they're easy watches to repair, easy watches to work on, and their automatics are a great watch. Do I love Seiko quartz? I don't love any quartz. I really don't. I shouldn't say that. I like two-hander quartz, but I don't like seeing a second hand ticking. When I look at a two-hander and I glance down at it, I'm not reminded of the fact that it's not a mechanical watch, and it gives me that impression. But something about that ticking hand, I don't know, is always. And don't get me wrong, it really does have its place. And I have some in my collection. I fell in love with watches originally with Swatch back in the early '80s. Those were the first watches that I ever purchased and collected. And I just recently bought a couple of swatches at auction. I actually got a very original 82 Swatch vintage chrono. The reason being, back in the day, you couldn't get that. When I was a kid trying to get a chrono, there was no internet. There was none of that. So you went to the store and you got on a waiting list. And they would tell you straight out, you'd show up and say, well, I want one of the ones with the pushers that has the stopwatch feature and all of that. And I remember the first time I told a woman that, she said, oh, I'll get you on the list. I said, cool, how many people are on the list? She was like 300 or 400. And they just weren't making that many of the chronos, at least where I lived. I lived in very, very rural part of America, so I didn't even have a Swatch dealer in our state when they first came out. So on a vacation to Grandma's is where I bought the first Swatches that I had. I bought, I think, 4 or 5. I had saved up all year, and boy, I think I was probably 11 or 12 at the time, and I was probably 18 before the Swatch tan on my wrist actually went away, because I just never, ever was anywhere that I didn't have one of the original plastic Swatches on there. And it had a solid ETA movement in it, and it was waterproof to beat hell. Those things, I was on a swim team. I didn't even take it off to swim, and I mean, not even take it off to race. Obviously, I swam in it because it was that kind of watch, but I never took it off for any reason. Slept in them. That's what started my love affair with watches. And so yeah, they have their place, but mechanical watches, as you get older, it's really what you want, as you start to collect, especially when you start to collect vintage, because they're going to run forever. This is a beautifully jeweled movement. And this one, amazingly, let me see what we got this at, $350. People, you're not going to buy anything that they're making today for $350 and get something of this quality and that beautiful look. I mean, that's just iconic. If you start looking around at some of the most beautiful and iconic Seiko models, you see this dial get used again and again and again, because it was just gorgeous. And when I say again and again and again, I don't mean you see it on anything modern, but in vintage, they just used it on all of the best lines that they did. The dive watches, some of the chronos all had that kind of blue tone dial. And when we hunt them down, that's usually what we're shooting for. Ideally is the dials, because the Seikos with the very vibrant dials are just gorgeous. So $350, you can make us an offer. Seiko automatic date with the beautiful two-tone blue dial. I'm Tommy with a better time, and I will see you on the next watch. God bless.